To some extent, all of these are small examples of the mobility of your consciousness and the ease with which it can be used. In a strange manner, symbols can be regarded as samples of the way you perceive its various levels of consciousness. Their changing guises can be used as signposts. Fire, for example, is a symbol made physical, so a real fire tells you obviously that you are perceiving reality with your physically attuned consciousness. A mental picture of a fire automatically tells you that another kind of consciousness is involved. A fire mentally seen that has warmth but does not burn destructively obviously means something else. All symbols are an attempt to express feelings that can never be expressed adequately through language. Symbols represent the infinite variety of feelings, and in various stages of consciousness these will appear in different terms, but they will always accompany you. There are several exceptions, however, in which pure knowing or pure feeling is involved, without the necessity for symbols. These stages of consciousness are infrequent and seldom translated into normal conscious terms. Let us take a particular feeling and follow it through as it might be expressed at various levels of consciousness. Begin with the feeling of joy. In normal consciousness, the immediate environment will be perceived in a far different manner than it would be, say, if an individual were in a state of depression. The feeling of joy changes the objects themselves in that the perceiver sees them in a far brighter light. He creates the objects far more vividly and with greater clarity. In feedback fashion, the environment then seems to reinforce his joy. What he sees, however, is still physical, the objects of the material world. Pretend now that he begins to daydream and falls into a reverie. Into his inner mind come pictures or symbols of material objects, people, or events, from perhaps the past as well as present, and future imaginings. The joy now being expressed with greater freedom mentally, but with symbols. The joy stretches out, so to speak, into the future, sheds also its light into the past, and may cover greater areas of expansion that could be shown in physical terms at that moment. Now imagine that our individual, from his reverie, falls either into a trance state or into a deep sleep. He may see images that are highly symbolic to him of joy or exuberance. Logically, there may be little connection between them, but intuitively the connections are clear. He now enters into his mental experiences far more deeply than in the reverie state, and may have a series of dream episodes in which he is able to express his joy and share it with others. He is still dealing with physically oriented symbols, however. Now, since we are using this discussion as a case in point, we will continue to follow it even further. He may form images of dream cities or people that are of a very joyful nature, translate the emotion itself into whatever symbols are pertinent to him. An exuberance may be translated into images of playing animals, flying people, or animals or landscape of great beauty. Again, the logical connections will be lacking, but the entire episode will be connected by this emotion. The physical body all the while is greatly benefited, because the beneficial feelings automatically renew and replenish its recuperative abilities. The feelings of joy now may lead to images of Christ, Buddha, or the prophets. These symbols are the changing scenes characteristic of consciousness at various stages. The experiences are to be considered as creations, creative acts all native to consciousness at various stages. Beyond this are states in which the symbols themselves begin to fade away, become indistinct, distant. Here you begin to draw into regions of consciousness in which symbols become less and less necessary, and it is a largely unpopulated area indeed. Representations blink off and on, and finally disappear. consciousness is less and less physically oriented. In this stage of consciousness, the soul finds itself alone with its own feelings, stripped of symbolism and representations, and begins to perceive the gigantic reality of its own knowing. It feels direct experience. If we use joy as our example, all mental symbols and images of it would finally disappear. They had emerged from it and would fall away from it, not being the original experience, but the byproducts. The soul would then begin to explore the reality of this joy in terms that can hardly be explained, and in so doing would learn methods of perception, expression, and actualization that would have been utterly incomprehensible to it before. Physical objects are the most obvious of your symbols, and precisely for that reason you do not realize that they are symbols at all. At different levels, consciousness works with different kinds of symbols. Symbols are a method of expressing inner reality. Working in one direction, the soul, using its consciousness, expresses inner reality through as many symbols as possible, through living, changing symbolism. Each symbol itself, then, is to its own extent conscious, individual, and aware. In so doing, the soul continually creates new varieties of inner reality to be explored. Working in the opposite direction, so to speak, the soul divests itself of all symbols, all representations, and using its consciousness in a different way, learns to probe its own direct experience. Without symbols to come between it and the experience, it perfects itself in a kind of value fulfillment that you presently cannot understand, except symbolically. Now these efforts go on whether you are awake or asleep. Once you are aware of these activities, however, it is possible to catch yourself in various stages of consciousness, and even at times to follow your own progress, particularly through dream states. Your body is your most intimate symbol at this point, and again, your most obvious. You will use the ideal of a body in most stages of consciousness. When you leave your physical body in any kind of out-of-body experience, you actually leave it in another that is only slightly less physical. This in turn is later discarded for one still less physical, but the ideal of the form is so important a symbol that you carry it through all of your religious literature and stories of hereafter. At one point it will vanish with the other symbols. Now there was a time, speaking in your terms, before the making of symbols, a time so divorced from your ideal of reality that only in the most protected areas of sleep does any memory of it ever return. It seems to you that without symbols there would be non-being, but this is a natural enough deduction since you are so symbol-oriented. Those stages of consciousness that occur after death still all deal with symbols, though there is much greater freedom in their use and greater understanding of their meaning. But in higher stages of consciousness, the symbols are no longer necessary, and creativity takes place completely without their use. Obviously, you cannot become aware of that stage of consciousness now, but you can keep track of the way symbols appear to you in both waking life and the dream state, and learn to connect them with the feelings they represent. You will learn that certain symbols will appear personally to you at various stages of consciousness, and these can serve as points of recognition in your own explorations. When Rupert is about to leave his body from the dream state, for example, he will often find himself in a strange house or apartment that offers opportunities for exploration. The houses or apartments will always be different, and yet the symbol is always a signpost that he has reached a particular point of consciousness and is ready to enter another state of consciousness.